Terence Coates, Deer Lake, Newfoundland. We continue with justice. 33. We call upon the federal, provincial, and territorial governments to recognize as a high society the need to address and prevent fetal alcohol spectrum disorder, FASD, and to develop in collaboration with Aboriginal people FASD preventive programs that can be delivered in a culturally appropriate manner. 34. We call upon the governments of Canada, the provinces, and territories to undertake reforms to the criminal justice system to better address the needs of offenders with fetal alcohol spectrum disorder, FASD, including providing increased community resources and powers for courts to ensure that FASD is properly diagnosed and that appropriate community supports are in place for those with FASD. Enacting statutory exemptions from mandatory minimum sentences of imprisonment for offenders affected by FASD. Providing community, correctional, and parole resources to maximize the ability of people with FASD to live in the community. Adopting appropriate evaluation mechanisms to measure the effectiveness of such programs and ensure community safety. 35. We call upon the federal government to eliminate barriers to the creation of additional Aboriginal healing lodges within the federal correctional system. 36. We call upon the federal, provincial, and territorial governments to work with Aboriginal communities to provide culturally relevant services to inmates on issues such as substance abuse, family and domestic violence, and overcoming the experience of having been sexually abused. 37. We call upon the federal government to provide more supports for Aboriginal programming in halfway houses and parole services. 38. We call upon the federal, provincial, territorial, and Aboriginal governments to commit to eliminating the over-presentation of Aboriginal youth in custody over the next decade. 39. We call upon the federal government to develop a national plan to collect and publish data on the criminal victimization of Aboriginal people, including data related to homicide and family violence victimization. 40. We call on all levels of government in collaboration with Aboriginal people to create adequately funded and accessible Aboriginal Pacific victim programs and services with appropriate evaluation mechanisms. 41. We call upon the federal government in consultation with Aboriginal organizations to appoint a public inquiry into the causes of and remedies for the disappropriation of victimization of Aboriginal women and girls. The inquiry's mandate would include investigation into missing and murdered Aboriginal women and girls, links to the intergenerational legacy of residential schools. 42, we call upon the federal, provincial, and territorial governments to commit to the recognition and implementation of Aboriginal justice systems in a manner consistent with the treaty and Aboriginal rights of Aboriginal peoples, the Constitutional Act 1982, and the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples, endorsed by Canada in November 2012.